Students, Assalamu alaikum. I welcome you all in this lecture. Today we are going to discuss about the fiscal measures or fiscal policy to correct excess and deficit demand. Dear students, you know that fiscal policy refers to revenue and expenditure policy of the government. It is also called budgetary policy of the government. When we talk about the components of fiscal policy and the way these are used, following are the principal components of fiscal policy. Along with each component, we are describing the way it is used to correct the situations of excess and deficit demand. Number one is government expenditure. Number one is government expenditure. Or these are the principal components of fiscal policy for whom or for which or by used to these to correct the situations of the excess and deficit demand. Number one is government expenditure. It is a principal component or principal instrument of fiscal policy. The government of a country incurs various types of expenditures, mainly number one, expenditure on public works programs such as the construction of roads, dams, bridges, etc. Number two is expenditure on education and public welfare programs. Number three is expenditure on the defense of the country and the maintenance of law and order. Dear students, number two is taxes. Number two is taxes. When we talk about the taxes are a compulsory payment made to government by the household and the producing sectors. By increasing the tax burden on the households and the producers, the government reduces purchasing power in the economy. On the other hand, by lowering the tax burden, the government increases the purchasing power. Thus, when deficit demand is to be corrected, or when aggregate demand needs to be increased, tax burden on the households and the producers is reduced. Likewise, when excess demand is to be corrected or aggregate demand needs to be decreased, tax burden on the households and the producers is increased. And number three is public borrowing. Public borrowing or public debt. By borrowing from the public, the government credits public debt in a situation of the deficit demand. Or when aggregate demand needs to be increased, the government reduces it is borrowing from the public, so that people are left with greater liquidity or cash balances and aggregate expenditure remains high. And another and last point is borrowing from RBI. From RBI means the central bank. The students borrowing by the government from the RBI is another element of fiscal policy. It is stepped up the fight deflationary gap and reduce it to fight inflationary gap. Higher borrowing often releases greater liquidity in the economy as required when there is a deflationary gap, when borrowing is reduced as required when there is inflationary gap. The amount of liquidity in the economy is reduced, which is expected to reduce aggregate demand. For the monetary policy, you have to understand the monetary policy are a measure of or monetary measures to correct the fiscal to correct the excess and deficit demand. We will discuss about this monetary policy in my next lecture. Till then, be safe at your house. Thank you very much.